The rain had just stopped over Moscow when Mikhail Sokolov got the phone call that would change his quiet evening completely. He was sitting on the living room floor, helping his 7-year-old daughter Olia build a tower out of wooden blocks when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He almost didn't answer. It was 9 in the evening, and after a long week at the office, he wanted nothing more than to finish this tower, read one more chapter of a bedtime story, and sleep. But the name on the screen made him sit up straight. It was Anastasia Volkova, his boss. Mikhail worked as a senior architect at a design firm in the center of the city, and Anastasia was the head of the studio. She was calm, sharp, always composed in meetings, the kind of person who never seemed to need help from anyone. So when her name appeared on his phone at 9 at night, his first thought was that something had gone wrong with a client or a project deadline had changed. He answered quietly, stepping into the hallway so Olia wouldn't hear. "Anastasia Petrovna, is everything all right?" For a moment there was only silence, and then he heard her voice, low and unsteady, nothing like the voice she used in the office. "Mikhail, I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to call." She told him in short, careful sentences that she was at a restaurant downtown on a date arranged by a dating app, and that the man across the table had been drinking too much and would not let her leave. She had gone to the restroom just to breathe, just to think, and now she was standing in the hallway near the kitchen, hands shaking, trying to decide what to do. "I don't want to make a scene," she said. I don't feel safe walking out alone." Mikhail didn't hesitate. "Send me the address. I'm coming." He looked back into the living room where Olia was carefully placing the last block on top of her tower, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, the way she always did when she was focused. He felt the small ache that came whenever he had to leave her, even for a little while. Since his wife had passed 3 years ago, it had always been just the two of them, and every evening apart from her felt like borrowing time he wasn't sure he had. He called his elderly neighbor, Lydia Ivanovna, who had watched Olia many evenings before. She agreed at once, no questions asked, and within 10 minutes she was at his door in her house slippers and cardigan, telling him to go, that Olia would be just fine building castles with her. Mikhail kissed his daughter's head, told her he would be back before she finished her chapter, and stepped out into the cool, damp night. The restaurant was not far, a quiet place with soft yellow lights and big glass windows, the kind of place meant for calm conversations, not what was happening inside. Mikhail parked across the street and walked in, scanning the room until he saw her. Anastasia was sitting very straight in her chair, her hands folded tightly on the table, her eyes fixed somewhere past the man in front of her. The man, tall, red in the face from wine, was leaning forward, talking too loudly, his voice carrying across nearby tables. She looked smaller than Mikhail had ever seen her look in the office, where she usually stood like someone who owned the room. He walked over, calm, unhurried, the way he approached everything. "Anastasia, sorry I'm late," he said, as if they had planned to meet all along. He placed a hand gently on the back of her chair. "Ready to go? Olia's waiting." The man blinked up at him, confused. "Who are you?" "Her ride home," Mikhail said simply, his voice even, not unfriendly but final. Anastasia stood immediately, gathering her coat, and Mikhail helped her into it the way he might help anyone, though his hand lingered just slightly longer than necessary at her shoulder. She didn't look back at the man across the table. They walked out together into the cool night air, and only once the restaurant door closed behind them did her shoulders finally drop, as if she had been holding herself together with invisible string, and it had just been cut. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know who else to call. I'm sorry to pull you away from Olia." "Don't apologize," Mikhail said. "I'm glad you called me." They stood there a moment on the sidewalk, streetlights reflecting in puddles left by the earlier rain, neither of them quite ready to say goodnight. Then Mikhail offered to drive her home, and she accepted, quiet and grateful, her hands still trembling slightly as she got into the passenger seat. The drive was mostly silent, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that settles between two people who don't need to fill every space with words. Anastasia looked out the window at the wet streets passing by, and Mikhail glanced at her once or twice, noticing how different she looked away from the office, softer somehow, more human. When they arrived at her apartment building, she didn't get out right away. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you come? You didn't have to. You have Olya. You have your own life." Mikhail thought about it for a moment before answering. "Because you sounded scared, and because you've never asked me for anything before, not once in 3 years of working together. If you were asking, I knew it mattered." She smiled faintly at that, though her eyes looked tired, and there was something else in them too, something Mikhail couldn't quite name in the dim light of the car. "Good night, Mikhail. Thank you, truly. Good night, Anastasia Petrovna." She hesitated at the door of the building, turning back once to look at him before disappearing inside. Mikhail sat there a moment longer than he needed to before driving home. Over the following weeks, something between them shifted, quietly, the way morning light changes before anyone notices the night has ended. Anastasia began stopping by his desk more often, not just for project updates, but to ask small things, how Olya's school play had gone, whether he had tried the new coffee shop near the office. Mikhail found himself looking forward to these moments more than he wanted to admit, though he told himself it was simply friendship, simply two colleagues who had shared an unusual night. But Olya noticed things that Mikhail didn't. One evening, Anastasia came by their apartment to drop off some design papers Mikhail had left at the office, and she ended up staying for dinner, sitting on the floor with Olya, helping her draw a picture of a garden with too many colors. Olya laughed more that evening than she had in weeks. And later, as Mikhail walked Anastasia to her car, his daughter watched from the window with a small, thoughtful frown on her face, the kind adults often miss on children. That night, after Anastasia left, Olya asked, "Papa, do you like Anastasia?" Mikhail, surprised, answered carefully, "She's my friend and my boss. She's kind to us." "But do you like her the way you liked Mama?" Mikhail didn't answer right away. He tucked the blanket around his daughter and sat quietly beside her bed, thinking about the question longer than he expected to. "I don't know yet," he finally said, honestly. "Maybe." Olya nodded, satisfied with the honesty, and closed her eyes. Weeks passed, and the quiet friendship between Mikhail and Anastasia continued, comfortable and easy, though never named as anything more. Then, one afternoon, everything changed with words neither of them had planned to say out loud. It happened on an ordinary Friday, the office nearly empty, most of the staff already gone for the weekend. Mikhail was gathering his things when Anastasia appeared at the doorway of his office, holding 2 cups of tea, the way she sometimes did before their end-of-week talks about ongoing projects. But this time she didn't sit down right away. She stood there, cup in hand, looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen before, careful and a little afraid. "Mikhail, can I tell you something? And I need you to just listen, not respond right away." He nodded slowly, setting down his bag. "That night, at the restaurant," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I didn't only call you because you were the safest person I knew. I called you because I wanted it to be you. I have wanted it to be you for a long time, longer than I probably should admit as your boss." Mikhail stayed silent, his heart suddenly loud in his chest. "I've watched you with Olya," she continued. "The patience you have, the gentleness, even after everything you've been through. I told myself for a long time that it was just admiration, just respect for a good father and a good employee. But it became more than that. And that night, when I was scared and alone, the only name I could think to call was yours. Not because you were nearby, because I trust you. Because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, Mikhail." The office was very quiet after she finished speaking. Outside, the evening traffic hummed faintly through the windows, and somewhere down the hall, a printer clicked and stopped. Mikhail stood up slowly and walked closer to her, taking the teacup gently from her hands and setting it on the desk beside his own. "I didn't expect to hear that today," he said quietly, "but I think, somewhere in me, I've known for a while too. I just didn't let myself say it, because I was afraid of what it would mean, for my job, for Olya, for everything." "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now," Mikhail said, "I think I'm tired of being careful about something that already feels certain." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, her fingers curling gently around his. Neither of them said anything else for a long moment, simply standing there in the quiet office, the weight of unspoken months finally settling into something real. That evening, Mikhail brought Anastasia home again, but this time there was no hesitation at the door of her building. He walked her inside, and later, when he returned to his own apartment, he found Olya still awake, waiting up for him with a small, knowing smile. "You look happy, Papa," she said. "I am," he admitted, sitting down beside her. "Is Anastasia going to visit more?" Mikhail smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his daughter's forehead. "Would that be all right with you?" Olya thought about it seriously, the way children do when a question truly matters to them. "I think Mama would like her," she finally said. "She's kind. And she makes you smile like this." Mikhail felt his throat tighten, gentle tears rising, though not from sadness. He pulled his daughter into a hug, holding her close, feeling for the first time in 3 years that the empty spaces in his life were slowly, carefully, being filled again, not replaced, never replaced, but gently made whole. In the months that followed, Anastasia became part of their small family in quiet, unhurried ways, joining them for dinners, for weekend walks in the park, for Olya's school events, always careful never to rush, always letting Mikhail set the pace of healing and love. And Mikhail in turn learned that loving again did not mean forgetting what came before. It meant making room, slowly, the way a garden makes room for new flowers among the old. One evening, almost a year after that rainy night at the restaurant, Mikhail sat once again on the living room floor, helping Olya build another block tower, this time with Anastasia beside them, laughing softly as the tower wobbled and finally fell. Mikhail looked at the two of them, his daughter and the woman he had once thought was simply his boss, now undeniably something far more precious, and he felt a peace settle into his chest that he hadn't known in years. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who were quietly waiting all along, hoping we would finally see them. And sometimes love doesn't announce itself with noise or drama. It arrives quietly in a phone call at 9 in the evening, in a hand offered without hesitation, in a little girl's honest question, and in the slow, patient unfolding of two hearts that were simply waiting for the right moment to finally speak.